Welcome. My name is Jen Barnhill. I am a columnist with military.com. I'm doing military dinner table conversations in order to inform the columns that I write. I'm wanting to hear from families on specific topics. So this morning we had another session of this topic, talking about childcare. And so knowing our families are working and needing different times to offer. This is the second session. I'm so glad to have you all here to learn more about what you're going through. That can be from your individual perspective, if you represent a group of people, or if you want to share a story from a friend. I want to hear about it. I want to hear what you're hearing, because we're only as good as the information that we have available to us. And as we know, not always is this type of information something that's collected in a survey. So this conversation, what we'll do is I will first introduce you to our guest, which is Kayla. She is an expert in all things childcare. She started off with Operation Childcare and then has now transitioned, also has a nonprofit arm, the Operation Childcare Project. And she is an advocate and a military family member herself. And that's why she's here to kind of help provide some context to the situations that everyone's in. But the primary reason we're here is to hear from you and your stories. So we're going to do that two ways. One is through polling questions that I'm going to just pop into the chat. You can answer it. They're all like anonymous. We don't tie who said what to those poll questions. They're just aggregated at the end. And then obviously you can put any feedback in the chat you want to. But we're also, hopefully you'll come off mute and, or raise your hand and share to expound on that question. And I really do want to hear from people who have maybe a different experience. So if one person shares and you have something different to share, please, feel free to chime up and share that too. We're here for a conversation. So that said, I'm going to stop talking for a minute and introduce Kayla and let her talk about what she's hearing in the community, her organization, and we'll get started.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I could talk forever because that's what I do all day. So I will be very succinct. I even have some slides up on my second screen to keep me moving. Okay, so I am a military spouse. I do currently own two companies. The nonprofit is where I spend pretty much all of my time. We do a lot of predominantly case management at this point. So what we found is that on the DoD side, that there are experts kind of siloed throughout. There's someone who's an expert in a CDC for a specific branch, in an FCC for a specific branch, for a specific base. It's all very piecemealed. But then on the civilian side, they are also pretty not aware of the situations that military families go through, since we do embed ourselves into our local communities and the areas we serve. What we find is that there are quite a few civilian, what am I thinking? Like groups, and they think that we actually have free childcare in the military. And so they're actually really surprised to find out that we have childcare issues, because they don't get military families. So there's a gap, right, that happens between what the DoD is offering, maybe the accessibility issues with it, the transparency issues with it, and then the civilian community just not really being aware of what's happening in our lives or what we do or do not need. And then there's us, right, where we have to navigate what is best for our families. Is it something from the DoD? Is it something that's civilian? It's something private? And we have to figure that out kind of all on our own, right? Because there is no one who's an expert in all the things. So what my organization has done is become an expert in all the things. So in our case management, most of our cases are people who have applied for DoD fee assistance in some way, and they're still lingering, sometimes months or years later, or they were approved and then it was taken back, or what is available doesn't work for them, or they don't understand a program. And so we work with them through our case management for that. Because we are embedded into our local communities, we also have local resource knowledge. And if we don't, we get it. So we believe that when it comes to resources, that we need to vet them first. We need to vet them for military family access. And that we have seen this growing distrust, right, between military families and the resource givers. And that's because when military families are in crisis and they need that resource, they reach out and they get their PDF, they get their web link, they get whatever it is that is given to them at that time, and then they try to reach out It could be hours, it could be weeks later that they find out that they're not eligible for that. And we never want that to happen. So we vet all of our resources ahead of time. We vet for income restrictions, for wait lists, for timelines, whatever it might be, so that when we do refer families to something local, we know that they're able to access that. If there is nothing available, then we plan around that. So we are just we're very down to earth. I like to call it the care plan that works in what we do, because we make sure that it does fit the needs of each individual family. There is no one size fits all. So I am not going to talk as much as humanly possible throughout this unless someone wants some knowledge on, is it supposed to be this way? Or is this what you're seeing? Then I will unmute, but otherwise silent, because I want to learn from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kayla. And feel free to pop your information in the chat if people do have any follow-on questions. I'm going to share anything that any resources that are put in the chat, I'm going to send out in our summary of the event. So you won't have to lose anything. So I just asked a question about different types of care and number of children. And I know that in the earlier session, we talked a little bit about what challenges folks are facing. That could be like, it is easy to find care for my children who are school aged, but it's not easy to find care for my younger children who the cost is exceptionally higher. What are you all, where are your challenges? Where does that lie? Because we really want you to drive the conversation, and then we can come up with some follow-on questions. But if anyone's willing to share a little bit about their experiences and come off mute, happy to hear from you.
I had sorry, Jennifer. I just had an interesting development today, actually. Kayla has been amazing in helping us find care and things like that. I've just got her involved within the past month, but we've been searching for care since my baby was born 9 months ago, and we PCS'd 1 month after she was born, and also when I was 5 months pregnant. So we've been searching for all this time to find care, and the challenge was that I didn't work, and I needed childcare to work more in order to afford childcare. So it was kind of an endless cycle, because I couldn't work more without childcare, and I couldn't have childcare without working more. So we had been working to find an infant place for 9 months and just couldn't find anything. So, but finally today I was able to finally, after calls, I don't even know how many calls, how many times we called the same place over and over and over the past few months. Somebody called me with this spot, and she was like an in-home place, my child care aware, like available, like all of those things. It hit all the right boxes. But here's the problem. I quit my job 2 weeks ago because I thought that it was just impossible to find childcare. And so I just was like, maybe I should just give up for a little bit and just take life as it is and find, just like take it easy for a while. So I'm currently trying to figure out how to navigate that, because I still have some side hustle stuff I could work on to try to make enough to make it work. But that's kind of been our little bit of the story.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Jennifer, did you want to unmute? Did you want to share something? I thought that she said that you did, but.
Yeah, so I actually am coming from the other side of the spectrum. I used to be in your all shoes. I actually run an in-home childcare, so I am a group home. We are retired military, and the reason I want to join this call is because from a childcare owner's perspective, I know that the cost of childcare is expensive, and I get that. I am one of the only childcares that is allowed to accept military subsidy. And I will tell you, the military subsidy has been nothing but a challenge and a headache. So all of my childcare parents who are military, who qualify for childcare through the military subsidy, I've had some parents give up because after 6-7 months of sending the same stuff in over and over and over again, they just get to the point where they're done. And you can call in and talk to somebody that's super, super nice. They will not give you a supervisor to talk to. They will not give you a manager to talk to. They give you the same song and dance over and over and over again. And I have one family who I probably spend every week almost 2 hours on the telephone with childcare aware, because we're submitting the same documentation over and over and over again. And in fact, she's got 2 kids and she's been on this program now for a year. And they have so she had to resubmit all her paperwork in October, which we did. We had everything turned in, everything was done. And her son they just sent me the paperwork for him, qualifying him to stay on the military subsidy. But her daughter, we're still waiting for her to get approved. I shouldn't say approved, to get reapproved. And they won't reapprove. And in fact, they sent us both an email today and said, due to not having such and such paperwork, we can't approve, so and so. And I'm one of those people, I keep documentation of every single person I speak to, who I speak to, and the information that they want. And I called again today and they told me that it's sitting in the Air Force side of it, and they're waiting for them to approve her other child. So from my standpoint, that is frustrating because I do offer childcare, and to me, I know childcare is expensive. So if I can offer the state subsidy and the military subsidy to help out these families, that's what I want to do. But I think the parents get so frustrated because they can't afford it. And even though they're being offered the military subsidy, they're not getting it because of the hoops that we're having to jump through.
Well, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to ask a poll question in a minute about that because that's come up in the other question, and I'm building the poll question right now because I want to hear from everyone. Anyone have any complimentary or other experiences related to what you just shared? And Jennifer, I really appreciate you sharing as a provider. That it's so key. Sarah?
That's really helpful, Jennifer. So first of all, we have 2 small children, ages 1 and 5. So they're both not school age kids yet. And I started working full time. And I, unlike Arya, was able to kind of patch together that really fast to get them into care as my job was starting. So the MCCYN hadn't started, but we were able to place them in care. But my spouse, who's the active duty person, has been on it. It took about 3 months for our subsidy to be turned on, and we were working with our civilian childcare facility to figure out how to work that. Just working with them how are they going to do the back pay, if they were going to be able to provide that. And he is logged in every month to make sure that subsidy comes in. So it's work intensive in addition. And it's a substantial amount of money, because otherwise, even with my additional income, it would just be too much to have the 2 small children in daycare, because we are also not close to any military base, so we don't have access to a CDC, so it has to be a daycare. And just because of how soon my job started, I was hired on, and they said, okay, you're starting on Monday. I did have to put my younger child, who's 1, in at home with a nanny for about a week, and come out of pocket for that, just to gap that care. And it was sort of I was coming out of pocket for just to get care for that time. So that's sort of where we're at right now.
Thank you for sharing. As more, we hear about the last conversation we had on the last month was about healthcare. And a lot of times we're talking about wait lists and waits and things that are costing mental, the time and the costs of that. I would really love to hear from someone who can kind of expound on what costs you've noticed. So for example, you think of, you're on a wait list. Of course, I'm going to ask that question later too. You're waiting on a wait list. You are filling out paperwork. What are the other things that you might have to wait for that impacts your family's decision-making and your family's well-being? What are some other topics that come up for you all?
Well, there's the time of, I think this is what you're asking. There's time of touring places, like just continuously, like I had to do, like they don't really keep your name. They might have it on the wait list, but they don't call you when they're available. So you just kind of have to keep calling, going to see the places, meeting with them, those kind of elements for us.
Has anyone had a positive experience with any of these things, like or a best case scenario that kind of speaks to how it could be if it was, more streamlined?
Yeah, I've gotten it down to a science. So I have managed to, in best case scenario, and just even on the website, the fee assistance website was updated today to reflect that there is a commitment to processing applications within 7 to 10 business days of submission. So not quite as fast as I've gotten my process, but I am really excited to see that. So if you do know the proper people to copy in and the proper words to say and the proper way to go about the communication, then you can get it through in, 2 to 6 weeks
Is
with
there,
reimbursement 2 months after.
does that resource exist? Like, is that something that is on Childcare Aware, or is there something, is that, I obviously, I'm sure you've created it with your work, but like, is there a place, where does the DoD kind of point to for that type of resource, or where do you all go for that resource? And Sarah, I see you're unmuted. If you want to share something different than what I just asked, go for it.
Well, so my spouse, he's definitely took the lead on this because I am totally frustrated by these kind of processes that require you to just stay on top of, like calling and or emailing and having that like continuous, like, hi, just circling back and checking in to make sure, how's that, um, application coming for, like the subsidy that we applied for, a month and a half ago. So I asked him as he was passing by, about how much time he spent on that. And that is specifically what he does in the military, is he is a human resources professional. So he said he spent about 20 to 25 hours initially to get that all sorted. And then now he spends about an hour a month just maintaining our subsidy for childcare. I also just want to put it out there that he is fairly senior and it just has the wherewithal to be able to navigate that. And I just think it would be a very frustrating process for just anybody with small children trying to access childcare. So
Yeah. And I just asked a question about how much time you spend doing paperwork. I mean, initial paperwork. So like, and that's perfect. That's a perfect answer. But feel free to answer that or to chime in. Does everyone kind of agree or have a similar experience where this is a major issue with the childcare provision, or is this something that's just like an initial hurdle? Like it's annoying to have to go to change your childcare region every time you move. Like, of course, there's annoyances, and you get assigned a new doctor and all those things. Is this something that is the primary concern? Would you have other primary concerns with childcare? Because we know childcare is clearly an issue across the board. What about military childcare is especially challenging for you guys? Or good. I'm not, there are great, amazing experiences, I'm sure, that exist as well. So
I think I would just echo what Sarah said about not everyone has the wherewithal to understand these processes and procedures that do or don't exist in writing anywhere, and knowing how to navigate them and how to just work through all these processes and systems. Like it's a lot. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot to it. And if you have a lot of small kiddos at home and you're trying to have a full-time job and money's tight, there's a lot of other stressors that can impact your time. And so I think that's one thing that I think of a lot is I'm pretty good at managing processes and projects, but not everybody is that their skill set or their strength. And so I think that would be a very big disadvantage and it would hold a lot of people back from even trying it and taking advantage of some of the different opportunities that are available.
Yeah, I think what you're all are sharing, it's like the barrier to entry to get, and entry is the wrong word, I think, but the barriers to accessing this benefit or this resource are high, it sounds like, from both a provider perspective, Jennifer, as you shared before, and the family member perspective. Is that an accurate assessment? Kayla, have you been hearing similar things, or are there other trends that you're noticing that are like causing the same level maybe of frustration? And obviously costs are high, and I know that availability is low, and so that's a huge
Yeah.
one.
Costs are high, availability is low, and I dropped in the chat. It's what Sarah said. It's not a one-time thing. I think if it was we just PCS'd and so we need to do this, it would be different. I am very much an expert in this in every way, shape, or form, and I still have to resubmit 3 times a year because they've come up with some arbitrary renewal date, either based on the month of the year, my child's age, something the center said offhandedly. And every time you do that, you have to wait for approval again. So it's not as easy as, getting it figured out and being like, hurdle done. It really is constant work. And if you don't have the mental space for that, because there's other costs, right? It's not always financial. So if you don't have the energy, if you don't have the mental space, if you don't have the support system and it's costing you in other areas, you're just not going to do it, which is unfortunate because it's there, right? But most families, they are not trying anymore. They hear these horror stories from other families, which are not made up. They're very much real, where someone has gotten into a center they couldn't afford, hoping that the fee assistance would start. Then they're in that center for months and months and months, drain all of their savings, can't afford to be in that center anymore, but they keep being told, well, if you just get us this one more thing, if you just do this one more thing. And so it really keeps them on the hook there until they can't afford to work to stay in that spot. So there is more than, I think there's more than a financial cost, right?
Does anyone have anything to share, about that perspective or things that impact your decision making? Especially, I think that's, what kind of you alluded to is the self-selection, self-deselection. I mean, you're kind of leaning out, not leaning into employment. You're like stepping back because of a pre-decision that you've made, or you run into one hurdle and then it prevents you, possibly, depending upon your career, from being able to continue. I would love to hear from anyone who might be willing to share a little bit more of their personal experiences and how childcare has impacted your family's decision making.
So I would just say that, so we have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. So the 5-year-old's about to go into kindergarten. There we have a few choices for where she goes to school, but before and after care is the issue, because I work in the city, so I have a decent commute. And again, we don't live close to a base, so we don't have access or any family that are nearby. So we are impacted by how do we keep our subsidy and not have to, we are disincentivized from having to go through that process again with a new provider, either like if she goes to the school that's close to our house and they have a before and after care program, but they don't do the subsidy, then how do we make that work? How do we make, and her brother is going to another daycare, so that we have, dual place. So we're trying to work with, we love the childcare provider that we have right now. He's very willing to work with us. And they seem to have a really good system for being able to, to navigate our subsidy, even though there's not a lot of military members at the daycare center. And, so we're trying to work it so that if she needs transportation to and from the before and after care, so she can stay at her current childcare center for before and after care. But it's just, it is kind of a hard thing to navigate. The other thing is too, we're CONUS now, but OCONUS, that's a whole nother item for, I don't know if anybody is OCONUS in this group, but that's another thing for the folks that live overseas and they just don't have access because there's just no spots in CDCs. I know that that's something that when we were living overseas, that was an issue that a lot of families encountered, that they just did not have the ability to take breaks or place their kids in care, and they could not afford it, and they could not work because there were not jobs to be had.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. OCONUS families have unique challenges for sure, and like it's a challenge to even continue working and under the sofa. And then you're also layering in, well, how am I going to predict care? Because maybe in the States there's seemingly more options for care. You might have to navigate a different language. I don't know if anyone has had that experience. I know, like, I lived in Japan. Andrea, do you have that an experience?
Yeah, we had an experience. We were OCONUS, we were in Germany, and we were a geographically separated unit. So it was a NATO assignment. So we were embedded in a community of about 1,500 people, and we were about an hour and a half from the closest installation. So all of our childcare was on the economy. And we did have some options, kind of. However, it was all time, like it was with the school year. So we got there in the fall. So we had to wait until the next academic year for our, only one kiddo was eligible for their kindergarten programs. They were only aged in that far. So I had one at home with me and one that could attend a traditional German kindergarten. And that was great. It was a great benefit. But just the timing and navigating the language barrier, and you do have to be savvy to like actually seek that out and do that, because there wasn't anybody that was really the person that helped you with that.
Yeah. I know a lot of that can be word of mouth and like passed down from family to family, like sharing that resource and like giving that information like through a command. But yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. I know that there are, obviously off installation care options. It just seems like that would be harder. And I know folks probably illegally work as childcare providers, like more babysitting, and you're kind of hoping that military family member is doing it right. And they are most of the time, but I know there's not always, you can't know that, of course, like having all the things that I'm sure Jennifer can speak to as to what the requirements are to become a licensed or approved provider are quite extensive. So, we talked about like the types of childcare you're trying to access and wait lists, the amount of paperwork that, can kind of go in there. Is there any other layer of this conversation that we haven't touched on that is specific to the military? And Kayla, if you have a specific question that kind of guides that based on what feel free to ask. But I'm really hoping to understand, like, where do you all think this process or this experience could be made easier within, what are probably restrictions? It's not a entitlement. It's not something that every service member is entitled to. And so like money wise, it's not a lot allocated in that way. So given the restrictions, like how can we get this going towards a better way, like better experience for you guys? Aria, I think I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, like I think it's important to know that like a lot of us as military spouses, like I'm somebody who really works really hard to be positive and to like make the most of every situation and to like find every opportunity that's out there, and so many military spouses have that attitude. Because I'm sitting here thinking like, man, is there a positive, like what positive things have I gotten from this? Like what has been the positive thing? And it's tough because genuinely, I can't see I mean, Kayla's been a positive, but like she's trying to help fix a broken system, and so I just think it's important to note that like these are like very positive, like action oriented, amazing people who are really trying their hardest. Like these women on this call are like professionals, they are good at what they do. They know what they're doing. They're savvy. And yet like something like even those high achieving people can't make it happen, and I think just like the mental cost of that can be really challenging, like learned helplessness or just like you just keep trying and it's not there. So I just think it's important to note that like these are really positive, not everybody, but like there are a lot of people who are really giving their best effort. And so yeah, I just wanted to add that, just to like these these women are on this call, like they're making stuff happen in their lives. And I think that is just a cost that all of us kind of carry.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think the last conversation we had was about healthcare, and respite care came up as something that was a big struggle for many people, and accessing respite care, which it's not the same program, but it falls under the same, like, I'm sure Kayla she's like, no, Jen, cringe. Like, it's probably not the same program. But you go through EFMP to get approvals versus just like separate. And so it's similar in like what the cost is to your, we, like you said, we make it work, and we're really good at making it work, and we're really good at like coming up with strategic ways of approaching each PCS move to minimize disruption to our careers and our families. And it's really hard when there's like paperwork that can kind of disrupt that. Like, and where could we get it better? Where could we improve, and what could we do? Like, is there anything that you all can see from a practitioner perspective, from an advocate perspective, from a family member perspective? What would you like to see happen? Kayla, I see you're off mute, so if you have something to share. We're going positive with this, Kayla. Positive.
I have a positive, actually.
Okay,
that was why I unmuted myself. I have a positive. My positive is literally this. So it doesn't feel positive, right? Because everyone is getting together and saying, this doesn't work and it's trash. And these are the things it's doing to my family. But for me, this is a positive because I have done this a long time, right? It's been like 11 years now. And early on, it was very much, this is just a problem I'm seeing. This is not a problem that really exists. And so what I've been able to do as I collect these stories is really change the way that childcare is looked at in military families. So it's not necessarily that I say that we need non-traditional care, but it's not necessarily that we need non-traditional care, because what we need is pretty normal for military families. And it's just not what we're getting. So by getting these stories, by sharing this collective experience, I'm able to then say loudly and very proudly, what you're saying exists and what we're seeing isn't lining up. And I have the reports of the families that are supposed to be served by this to give that. And I know that you mentioned, this is it's not an entitlement, right? Working on it, guys. But as of this moment, not an entitlement. And I think the way to approach that is that if it's not an entitlement, it's not something the families are going to get, or if it's something they're going to struggle to get, then we just need to say it. We just need to be transparent about that. We just need to say, hey, this exists. If you have 30 hours and you have the ability to fight this for a while, and it's okay if you don't get it, then go for it. And I think that transparency is the piece that's missing. And then that's what I'm able to get from situations like this, where I'm able to say, yeah, it exists, but let's not pretend like what our website is saying right now, you get it in 7 to 10 business days, because that's not accurate. That's not accurate for anyone. And let's not say that there's supports if there aren't supports. Part of what we do in our case management is transparency. If you don't have an option, I'm going to tell you, we don't have an option for subsidized childcare right now. So we need to look at other areas of your life to figure out how we can support you until we can get that. And that's the transparency piece that I feel like families are not getting, because you're right, it's not an entitlement. but it's not advertised in that way. It's advertised in that families are supported and they do get this. And that is what's causing hardships along the route.
Yeah, no, I agree. It can't be a marketing or PR activity if it's not backed up with in how the administration of that program is happening. So I agree. That sounds very reasonable. And
Can I ask a quick question really quick before you go on? Kayla, I have a question for you.
Love it.
So I am I'm a childcare provider off of Fort Lauderdale. Well, I shouldn't say where I'm from, off the base.
Okay.
And the reason I did it is because back in the day when I was looking for childcare for my daughter, I couldn't find quality care. And I get that they offer the subsidy and stuff, and I get that it's not happening how it's supposed to happen. But all the providers that are in-home providers on the base, they're getting almost $1,200 to $1,500 a month per child, which is coming from the government. So why do they get that extra money for having kids? But when you're out in town and you are the only one that qualifies for military subsidy, why is it so hard for those parents then to get it? Is the money coming from two different places? Do you know? Because to me, I mean, I get it. They can only have 6 kids. I get it. But still, to me, $1,200 a month per child, I could stop what I'm doing and go on post and have 6 kids compared to the 20 that I have with my teachers. But I love what I do too much. It's not the money that is what matters to me. It's the quality of care that I give the kids that I have. But where does the money come from, and why is there such a huge difference?
I do know, and what a hot question. I love this. So it is different pools of money. Yes. So yours comes from an OSD program and Office of Secretary of Defense, and theirs comes from, it's allocated by through the CYP. So yes, they advertise it. I've done quite a few of these studies. So they advertise it at a certain cost. There are a lot of things that are not discussed as part of what an FCC provider has to go through. I'm not saying one person has it harder than the other. I'm just saying that again, marketing here does not match up with the lived experience of those who are doing this care. That being said, you really hit on an issue that we are working on the other side to do, which is, why would people participate in this program if they don't have to? You have zero incentive to do it. You don't get mass amounts there is no shortage of families needing childcare. Everyone needs childcare right now, and there's just not enough. And so we are not incentivizing family providers, home providers, center providers to jump through these hoops to make this work, when they can just take a civilian and then they don't have to do any of that work, right? There is a huge disconnect on that side. And that is also some of the work that we do, is help on that side, because there is a rhetoric that it benefits providers to accept this subsidy for military families. And so when we're able to then show, well, these are the struggles they're actually going through, this is the support they're actually missing, then we're able to shuffle things around. You know, some states have started also supporting that measure where they give additional funding, but the FCCs, unlike civilians who accept the subsidy, FCCs, they're advertised as being able to be their own business, but that's not actually how it works. A lot of bases you have to be available 10 hours or 12 hours a day. You have to take these families at this time. You have to work a minimum number of hours. You cannot be as laissez-faire as you want. You don't get to pick your kids. So if you get kids that come into you're like, oh, I have an opening and my neighbor needs childcare, I want to give my neighbor childcare. That would be amazing, right? But it's not how it works, because they don't have a high enough priority level. So you have to take someone else's children. And then if it doesn't really work out in your center, depending on what kind of support system you have, they may tell you, if you don't keep that child, even if that child is causing, a disruption, if they don't have enough support, because there's no bad children, right? If they don't have enough support, if they don't have what they need to thrive there, you can't have an FCC because you signed an agreement. So there's a lack of freedom and movement that comes with an FCC. Again, not saying that one has it harder than the other, but and it varies by location.
Is that coming? But see, I think every installation is different because I used to be an FCC provider,
are.
Board Camp Pendleton, and here where I'm at, they get to pick and choose what families they have. So even though they're required to be open, let's say at 4:30 in the morning and close at 6:30 in the evening, they choose their kids that they get to have, but they still get that funding for that child. And the parents aren't paying that much. So to all you moms that are on here that are looking for childcare, I would look, if you are near an installation, try and looking at like your installation, but make sure that when you go in to do like your interviews and stuff, you have that good feeling about them. You just don't stick them in there because you want to save money and stuff. Because the way I look at it is your children are like your most prized possession. And I know that like when I pick my families in my program, I know the one thing when we're done at the interview, the parent wants to come here, and I'm just saying this, but I always ask them for a key to their house. And if they won't give me a key to their house, then I won't take their child, because if they can't trust me with their most, with their possessions in their house, then why are they going to trust me with their most prized possession, which is their child? So, I mean, try and look at like your bases near you and see if there's a child care provider who does have like the spots open, but just make sure you have that good comfy feeling when you go in, and you don't have that feeling that, oh, this isn't going to work out. Because that's how I was, and that's why I started doing in-home childcare. Of course, I have my bachelor's degree in early childhood development, but that's how I got into doing this, because I work for the school district and I could not find quality care at this installation for my child.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Jennifer. I think it's important to understand, like, because these different perspectives are like, it's a circle, right? Like, if we don't get good quality providers, then there's not availability of care. If there was more providers, one would think that maybe the paperwork and the pushing people through the process would be minimized and the stress would be minimized in theory. So, to your point, Kayla, like incentivizing providers and understanding where you're getting, you've shared that, your motivation, I assume, and I don't want to assume, sounds like you just want to give back to the community that you were part of, but it doesn't. Would you do this for any other reason as a provider? And you don't have to answer that. I just am like, that's kind of my question.
Would I do what for any other reason?
Would you take this type of reimbursement process? Like, if it wasn't the DoD, if it wasn't the military reimbursing you, would you accept this type of insurance? Would you accept this type of process to accept a different group of people?
I do.
So it's almost, they're easier processes. Like, do you have it easier to reimburse through a different system? Like, they're easier to do this?
Well, yes and no. So I also accept state subsidy, which is through our state, and they used to be pretty easy, but they just changed their systems and stuff, so it makes it hard. Like I said, my thing is I want to offer quality childcare to all the families that are out there. And I know that the cost for childcare is expensive because minimum wage keeps going up. And in order for me to have good quality teachers, I need to pay them. So sometimes I lose money out of my own pocket to make sure that parents have quality care and that my teachers are getting paid. But I do look out there for like grants and stuff. So like I look for other ways to be able to pay my teachers, to be able to help offset the cost. One thing that I started 2 years ago is FlipGive. And my parents utilize FlipGive. That money can be then put towards their childcare, so they can make money off of that. And really I don't know if you guys have heard of FlipGive, but FlipGive is actually a really good program if a child care center like will have it, or anybody else. But you pretty much buy stuff online, and it's like all your favorite places. Like you can shop at Walmart, you can shop at Sam's and all that stuff, and a certain percentage goes back to that child care center. Then I use that to offset the costs of their childcare for their children. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. That's a great program. Knowing we're about to approach, the end of the hour, I wanted to make sure we touch on everything. And if anyone who didn't get to share about their experience, it's kind of your floor. Like, what do you want to share? What would you like to talk about? I want to hear from you all. So hi. Go for it.
Hi. Sorry, I was late. Actually, just came from talking with some other ladies about childcare, so was listening on the drive-in. But so I'm not a spouse. I'm an active duty member. But my spouse or my husband works full time, and childcare has been one of those things that not the responsibility of handling this entire like subsidy process has fallen to me, but he's just not as familiar with it because he has his own career and his own job. And so when you were talking about transparency earlier, that just really hit a nerve with me because if we're not going to get it, just tell me so I can stop wasting my time. Because we initially applied through the Air Force in September of 2022 because I had heard that it would take, you know, through the grapevine 7 to 8 months. So I was in my second trimester and I was like, all right, then we'll get done by the time the baby is here and actually needs childcare. And it is now February 2024 and we still are I don't know where it is in the process. And so I just feel like from a solutions standpoint, I only found out about the work that Kayla is involved in through somebody else posted something on Facebook, and I just happened to see like a survey link. If there is any way to advertise, this type of data gathering in more official channels, not just like through the Facebooks, because I'm only on there really to sell on Facebook Marketplace and to check a few things every now and again. But if something were to come out from commanders, the chief of staff of the Air Force's spouses are usually very involved in those processes when it comes to families. So having official messages get pushed through them, that would be, I think, really ideal in figuring this out, because I would have contacted y'all a long time ago rather than trying to juggle like, okay, my maternity leave's up, now I'm back at work full time, I work 12 hours a day, I barely get home enough to see my own kid who is at this daycare. So we pay a lot out of pocket because if someone's going to be with my child for 10 to 12 hours a day, like I need to fully trust them. Like you were saying, Jennifer, like she is our most prized possession. We went through infertility for 7 years to get her, so I'm not just going to hand her over to somebody. And so but it was a little bit of a detrimental thing in terms of like finances for our family. Like I had to change jobs so we could actually afford it. And just all of these different things that go along with that. So anyway, so just wanted to kind of give my piece. I don't know all the things that you guys talked about, but what I was hearing, I was like snapping as I was driving along, but not really because I was paying attention while I was driving. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I know Kayla is doing amazing work and putting it out there. There are restrictions on what the DoD can share. And so even the spouses of the non-official, like they want to make sure it's not like a for-profit model, because there are DoD contracts awarded that are the official ones that they're supposed to push people to who are supposed to be doing that job. And if they're not doing that job, that's the family voices sharing, with reporters or with Kayla and advocates who are elevating those voices to like, I only have my child, right? Like I'm only dealing with mine. You're only dealing with yours. Like if we are not collecting those responses through her survey or through an article or whatever, then there is no collective voice to ask for that kind of like, let's streamline this. Because I think our leaders do want to improve things. They just don't, they need that collective voice, right? They're not surveying people every week. And then if they do a survey during COVID, it's not valid anymore because then it's by the time they put out the information, it's 2 years later and it's not the same scenario. So that's why we need organizations like Kayla's to be able to pivot and get some of the information out to folks sooner to make decisions, but also to talk to you like live right now. What are you currently dealing with? If you have things that you want to share, feel free to do it now, but also you can email me and reach out and I will continue to have an open dialogue if we don't get to share it tonight. So you're not getting to, I'll put my name, you have my emails, but feel free to email me. Andrea, do you want to share?
I would just say one other thing that we ran into issue with before we went to CONUS, we had a 1-year assignment for school. And so those 1-year assignments, you're one of 1,500 students coming in and coming out, and you just feel like the tide. And we were very lucky that we found an off-base provider that had a spot. Like we were incredibly fortunate. That was like, whatever, all the stars aligned for us to be able to do that. But I think that's one thing in terms of timelines that's critical, because a lot of spouses that I know, they had to take a year off simply because there wasn't childcare available, because we're like the overflow of 1,500 families is the overflow. And the location we were in, Leavenworth, Kansas. So there wasn't, a ton of places that you could take your kiddos that were our age that fit, what we were looking for in-home. So that would be the thing, along with the timelines, is why that's so critical, because 1 year isn't long enough to get off a wait list in a lot of places.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like, I don't know about you, but I know where we are right now. Priority doesn't kick people out. So once you're in, we're at near the Naval Postgraduate School. And so there's faculty, DoD faculty, that if they buy their time, they're here for years and they're not leaving the way that we would be leaving. So if they wait 2 years, they still get 3 years at that center where they've done, then it's a 5-year cycle, but this active duty don't bump them out. They don't kick them out. So it's like, there's different parts of the process that I think are worthy of examination. And I really appreciate everyone sharing these different perspectives. Cause like I said, I only have mine. We can stay on and chat after we stop the recording, but I just wanted to thank you all for coming and participating and sharing. And please reach out if you have anything else to share. If it's okay with you all, I probably will send some emails just to ask a follow-on question or clarify something. I do write a summary of everything. We will provide resources from Kayla to help connect everyone to those resources. If anyone who has who's in this call has a resource they want to share, Jennifer, if you have a great thing, like this is a great resource and you want to share it, pop it in the chat and we'll include that in the summary conversation, or email me. And then I hopefully will take some of this and pitch it to my editor and write articles about that. And so the future conversations we have are also informed by what you all share in the registration time of what do you want to talk about in the future. So thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording and we don't have to hop off right away, but thank you all for coming and thank you for participating.